Okay, here we are. We're going to utilize the evidence table or the evaluation table, and we are going to apply a qualitative article to this. So again, put in your authors, your year, and the title of the article. We're going to address the purpose and the problem, but before we do that, I want you to recognize that since qualitative research really seeks to describe or explore a phenomena, oftentimes you aren't going to see real neat and tidy explanations or a real neat and tidy question. At times you will, oftentimes you will not. Many times they are just kind of general and vaguely worded. And then, let me see here, you're going to look at the design, and we're going to look at the sample size, we're going to look at the major variables and the measurements of these, and then we'll come back to the table. So this is the abstract. It's a little different than some of the abstracts you see, but it does give us a nice little summary, qualitative right there, so you know you have a qualitative article. I'm actually going to go down here. This is the background, your literature review that you should see in all articles. Okay, so right here, this is important information. Okay, so their objective was to use this qualitative research methods and a community participant-based participatory approach, those are important words to remember, to characterize how asthma health communication and asthma action plan delivery are perceived and experiences by these LEP caregivers, which I'll tell you what that is in a minute. So what's really important is that if you had to figure out a research question or what the heck they were trying to do, it's this, characterize how asthma health communication, that's a major variable, and asthma action plan, another major variable, are perceived by these caregivers. Okay, let me go back up because LEP is what they use throughout this. This article or study is about limited English proficiency, LEP, asthma health care providers. They are Latinos. They speak the Spanish language. Okay. So, if we go to the study population, again, I just mentioned it was the Latino folks who are caring for actually children with asthma. The setting was in New Haven, Connecticut, and they wanted to a community-based participatory approach as well. So we're going to remember that. And then it talks about the methods. So this is a qualitative study with a grounded theory approach and also a community-based participatory approach. So we're going to put both of those in the table. Okay, that explains the research team, which is always important. Qualitative boy, it requires a lot of work. I just want to say that. So they did a couple things here. They did qualitative interviews, but they also did a qualitative focus group. So in the qualitative interviews, they did a conducted semi-structured one-to-one in-depth interviews in Spanish, and they received written consent for audio recordings, and they also, the translation process was also consisted of verbatim Spanish translation. Those are a few of the things you want to look at. In the qualitative focus group, they used a scripted guide, which is very important. And I thought this was interesting because this is community participatory based aspect. They went through and they talked to these folks, and then they had this community, these folks, some of them, design an instructional video to teach important asthma lessons to other LEP asthma care providers, which is very cool. Okay, so let's go back. So the purpose was to explore the experiences of asthma caregivers to the kids and develop themes to build in that area. And that came from that one section that was right, the objective that was right up. I'm so sorry to whip you through this. The objective that came right out of here also. Okay, so that really was the purpose. Okay. They had 20 Latino LEP asthma caregivers, and they had a focus group, and it had 5, so their N was 25. I didn't get down, that was actually in the data analysis part, so I'll show you where that was. That was their sample size. And the setting was the community. Oh, the setting was New Haven. New Haven, Connecticut. A population of, I think it was 130,000. Okay. And I already mentioned these were the major variables: the asthma health communication and then the asthma action plan delivery. The measurement of the variables for the purposes of the qualitative were the semi-structured one-to-one in-depth interviews in Spanish, and then the focus group had a scripted guide. Okay, so data analysis, when they were now analyzing their data, and I showed this to you, they had audio recordings and they had verbatim transcription as well. And we're going to talk about this. But they did coding, they do iterative data analysis, they do a constant comparative method. 3 investigators did their constant comparative analysis separate or independently, and then they would come together, and there was also member checking. Once again, qualitative studies, when done right, are very extensive and take a lot of time. So let me go back to the methods here. Let me see here. Or actually, yeah, under qualitative interviews. So we talked right here, this is what they did for analyses and their tools, semi-structured one-to-one. And here we go with this. They used a scripted guide for the qualitative focus group. Okay, so data analysis. The thing with data analysis and qualitative studies is, as you are interviewing people, you are actually conducting the analysis at the same time. Whereas with quantitative, you collect all the data and then you do the analyses. So this tells you exactly how they analyzed this. They coded all the transcripts. They used their grounded theory approach, but they did iterative data analysis. They did a constant comparative method. This is where I mentioned the 3 investigators read and then individually coded transcripts, and they would come together. They would go through transcripts line by line. They reached consensus. So it's really quite an extensive analysis. And then it talks about the focus group that they did, where they had the video recording. And this was reviewed by members of the research team, and they looked for triangulation, which is a certain aspect of qualitative analyses. Okay? So let me go back to that. So what I wrote in here was they did coding, the iterative data analysis, all those things I just mentioned. Okay? So major themes. These are the results. Even though here I know it does say quantitative results. I actually moved the results for the qualitative right here to major themes. Okay? So let's go to results. They talk about the participant characteristics. This is where I got the N for the study. There's 20 LEP caregivers. Okay, and they talked about the length of the interviews, quite extensive. They give you all the demographic breakdown. And then they talk about the focus group down here, 5 additional LEP caregivers. Okay, so N25. Okay, now these are our themes. They talk about asthma burden. They talk about language discordant communication. This is what they found in their analysis. They found about barriers to interpreter services, and they found about action plan currency. Now each one of these, remember with qualitative, we take these words from the participants and we put them, those are a part of our analysis. So they talk about this. This is what somebody, for example, the dread of asthma-related mortality event for the child was frequently mentioned. The following example embodies this idea. So this is actually what somebody stated. Okay, and so those were our 4 themes, and I put them right in here. So from the interviews, asthma burden, language discordant communication, services. I think I'm missing a word there. I think there's a problem with interpreter services. And the action plan currency. Okay, so the focus group findings right here, they also talked about asthma burden, language discordant communication, and desire for more learning opportunities. So they had 3 themes, and this one had 4, the interviews themselves. And then it's fun to go through and read these. It's amazing to me what insight you can get from folks when you're interviewing them. Okay, so here's the overall themes for the focus group, okay? So then we have the discussions, and it talks about the findings and all those, as it does up here as well. What the findings were, what they found. I know I'm moving through this fairly quickly. Okay, I want to go through here. It also talks about, of course, limitations, again, of a study, which we're asking you in the table. And we want to know about strengths, and then we want to know about the clinical significance. So what I put in here for the appraisal of worth was the strength. This study actually offered up important insights from which researchers and policymakers can build and test hypotheses. So that means test hypotheses means they need to come up with a quantitative study, and they can start examining this topic as well. The limitations are that it was a single geographic location, and so of course you can't generalize, and maybe they could do some, this study would just maybe need to be replicated in another area. Okay, so we now go back to that John Hopkins table where we want to look at strength of evidence and the quality of evidence. This is a level 3 because it's a qualitative, and I gave it a B rating because of the criteria that it met. One of the things is grounded theory. This day and age, you really should have 30 or more participants. That's in the literature. Actually, sometimes they go up to 100, which is kind of crazy. But I gave it a B related to the criteria. And then the clinical significance, I think this is really important because it did describe these experiences that these patients have, or these people who care for caregivers, and they really need to be addressing, and I wrote here, see themes. The other thing that the clinical significance pointed out to me was there needs to be improved access to educational opportunities for the LEP caregivers, the lower proficiency English speakers. And so that's it. So if you have any questions, again, let your instructor know.